Welcome to my channel. I hope today's story will be something you truly enjoy. Please support me even more. Now, let's begin the story.
The 52nd floor of Sinclair Tower baked under the July Tulsa sun. The glass walls were fogged from the heat outside air conditioning fighting a losing battle. I sat alone in the back corner, hands flat on the polished table. My name is Raven Sinclair, 35 years old, the daughter this family wrote off a long time ago. My younger brother Cole stood at the head of the room in a perfect navy suit chest, puffed eyes locked on me. "You've always been the loser in this family," he announced, voice ringing off the walls. "As of today, I'm taking full control of Sinclair Oilfield Services." Applause exploded. Mom started it. Skylar screamed. Blake, his fiancé, jumped to his feet, clapping like he'd just won the lottery. Even Uncle Victor joined in. I didn't blink. Lauren Brooks, our CFO for 18 years, set her pen down and stood. "Before any leadership vote," she said calmly, "every major decision requires approval from the shareholder who controls at least 75% of the voting shares." Dead silence. Cole's face went white. "That's impossible." Lauren didn't answer. She just looked straight at him. "If you want to know how the forgotten older sister ended up owning 3/4 of a century-old oilfield empire while her spoiled little brother stood there screaming, don't move. Smash the like button right now, subscribe, and hit the bell, because the next 8 parts are going to blow your mind." 15 minutes before the official meeting started, the conference room already felt like a furnace. I took the seat farthest from the head of the table, the one nobody ever fought for. The leather was still warm from the sun beating on the windows all morning. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Across the room, my mother Evelyn leaned toward my Uncle Victor, her voice low, but not low enough. "She should have tried harder, Victor. Raven could have gone to a real school if she'd wanted it. Cole worked for everything he has." Uncle Victor nodded without looking at me. "Kid sister never wanted the pressure. Cole was born for it." I'd heard versions of that sentence my entire life. It started the day our father died on a rig floor 15 years ago. I was 20, home from community college for the weekend. Cole was 17, still in high school, already the golden boy who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. Grandfather Henry stepped in to raise us. He put Cole on the fast-track private tutor summer internships on the rigs, then straight to Harvard Business School the minute he turned 22. Mom bragged about Cole's grades to anyone who would listen. Me, I stayed in Tulsa, got my petroleum engineering technology degree at OSU Tulsa, and went to work in the drafting department. Grandfather said I had the best eye for pipe stress calculations he'd ever seen. Mom said I was wasting my life drawing pictures of pipes. Every holiday dinner, every birthday, the comparison never stopped. Cole got the new truck at 18. I got a used Civic. Cole got the corner office at 25. I got moved to the trailer at the Cushing yard because women don't belong in the shop. Cole got introduced to investors as the future of Sinclair Oilfield Services. I got introduced, if at all, as Raven. She handles some of the technical drawings. When Grandfather had his first minor stroke 13 months ago, Mom flew Cole in from Houston within hours. I was already at the hospital because I lived 10 minutes away. She walked right past me to hug him. Cole spent 2 weeks learning the business at Grandfather's bedside. I spent those same 2 weeks keeping the company running while he posed for pictures with the old man. 3 months later, when Grandfather had the massive stroke that left him unable to speak, Mom decided Cole should move back permanently. She started planning the transition like it was already done. Skylar, our little sister, flew in every weekend to help him prepare his vision presentation. Nobody once asked what I thought. Nobody noticed I was the one signing the emergency checks when cash flow got tight. Nobody noticed I was the one on the phone at 3 in the morning renegotiating contracts with suppliers who wanted to pull out because the old man isn't in charge anymore. They were too busy measuring the new office for Cole's nameplate. I sat there now watching Blake, Cole's fiancé, scrolling through his phone, smirking at something Cole had just texted him. Skylar was touching up her lipstick, already acting like the sister-in-law of the next CEO. Mom reached over and squeezed Cole's hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud." Cole gave her that practiced smile he'd perfected at Harvard mixers. I almost laughed out loud. Grandfather Henry Sinclair built this company with grease under his fingernails and debt he couldn't pay. He didn't raise any of us to think power was something you inherited because you wore the right suit. He raised one of us to earn it. The clock on the wall hit 10 sharp. The independent board members filed in and took their seats. Lauren Brooks walked in last, carrying nothing but a single black folder. Cole stood up, smoothing his tie, ready for his moment. I stayed exactly where I was. Cole clicked the first slide, sunlight blasting off the screen so hard the projector fan whined. The title flashed in bold white letters, "A New Era for Sinclair Oilfield Services." He let the silence hang for 3 seconds, the way they taught him at those Harvard leadership seminars, then spread his arms like he was about to accept an award. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, voice smooth and rehearsed. "Grandfather built an incredible company, but the world has changed. Oilfield services are now a technology game. We're bleeding cash on outdated iron and overstaffed yards while our competitors are running lean with predictive analytics and automated rigs." Mom was already nodding before he finished the sentence. Skylar had her phone out, live tweeting every word. Cole advanced the slide. A giant red arrow pointed down over a photo of our Cushing maintenance yard, the same one Grandfather opened in 1984 with 8 guys and 2 second-hand cranes. Phase 1, he continued, immediate divestiture of all legacy physical assets. That means selling the entire Cushing mechanical complex, the fleet of 180 service rigs, and the heavy haul division. Estimated proceeds, $230 million after tax. Uncle Victor rubbed his chin, looking impressed. One of the independent directors scribbled something. Phase 2, workforce optimization. We currently employ 2,800 people across Oklahoma and Texas. Post-transaction will need fewer than 600, mostly data scientists and remote operations staff based in Houston. Mom actually clapped once, then caught herself. Skylar leaned forward. "That's 2,200 families freed up to pursue new opportunities," she added, using the exact corporate euphemism Cole had coached her on. Cole clicked again. A sleek render of a server farm appeared, overlaid with drone footage of driverless service trucks. Phase 3, full transition to AI oilfield services. Real-time fracture monitoring, predictive maintenance via satellite, zero human exposure on location. We partner with Silicon Valley startups, take a 40% equity stake, and flip the model from labor-intensive to asset-light. Projected EBITDA margin in year 3, 48%. He paused for effect, scanning the room. Every head except mine was nodding now. Blake Harrington, Cole's fiancé, a private equity associate who'd never set foot on a rig, raised his hand like this was a TED Talk. "Quick math," he said, grinning. "At a 15 times multiple, that's a valuation north of $3 billion in 36 months. Personal liquidity event for the family, mid-9 figures each." Mom's eyes glistened. She reached over and squeezed Cole's wrist. Cole clicked to the final slide, a mock-up of the new org chart. His name sat alone at the top, CEO and chairman in bold. Beneath him, a single box labeled Advisory Council with no names filled in. "I've already received written commitments from 3 institutional investors, representing 29% of the non-family shares," he said. "Together with the family block that gives us the votes we need today to execute immediately." He turned directly to the independent directors. "I'm asking for your support on 3 resolutions. Appoint me CEO effective immediately, authorize the asset sale, and approve the workforce reduction plan. Voting starts in 5 minutes. Skylar started clapping again. Mom joined in. Uncle Victor gave a slow, approving nod. Blake pulled out his phone, probably texting his partners that the deal was in the bag. Cole stood taller, soaking it in. The room smelled like victory to them. I stayed perfectly still, fingers resting on the table, watching the second hand on the wall clock tick toward the vote. I set my water glass down with a sharp clink that cut straight through the laughter still hanging in the air. Every head swiveled toward me. Cole's smirk froze halfway to full bloom. I spoke for the first time that morning, voice steady, no louder than necessary. Cole, the Cushing Yard holds the only triple-certified rapid response fracture maintenance contract Chevron has in Oklahoma. The current term expires in 87 days. Clause 14.2 triggers a $42 million liquidated damages payment if we fail to maintain 24-hour crew availability during transition. Your divestiture schedule breaches that clause on day 31. Have you run the penalty exposure, or are we just hoping Chevron forgets to read page 47? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees despite the July sun hammering the windows. Cole stared at me for 3 full seconds, the remote still in his hand, then forced a laugh that came out thin. Really, Raven? That's what you're bringing to the table right now? He pivoted to the rest of the room, palms open like he was on stage. My sister, ladies and gentlemen, the queen of pipe drawings, wants to lecture us about contract law. Skylar let out a loud snort. Mom pressed her lips together, eyes sparkling with second-hand embarrassment. Uncle Victor exhaled through his nose, the sound halfway between pity and amusement. Blake leaned back in his chair, arms folded, grinning like he'd paid for front-row seats. Damn, Cole, she really came armed with the fine print. Cole kept rolling, feeding off the energy. Look, the Chevron contract is old paper. Whoever buys the yard inherits the obligation, or we renegotiate. Worst case, we eat a few million and move on. The asset sale still clears $230 million. The math doesn't lie. I didn't flinch. It's not old paper. It's the reason Chevron hasn't moved their entire Permian fracture fleet to Halliburton for 8 straight years. The penalty isn't a few million. It's $42 million wired within 30 days of breach, plus immediate termination rights on every other major contract we have with them. You didn't model it because operations never sent you the amendment file. I signed the last extension myself 18 months ago. Cole rolled his eyes so hard the projector light caught the whites. Operations. Right, because the guys who weld pipe all day should be calling strategy. The laughter came back louder, meaner. Skylar slapped the table once. Raven, honey, nobody's saying the yard guys aren't sweet. We're saying the future isn't in greasy coveralls and lunchbox thermoses. Mom reached over and patted Cole's forearm, voice dripping pride. Your brother is just trying to protect his little sketches. Let him have that baby. Uncle Victor shook his head slowly. You've been stuck in that trailer too long, Raven. Fresh air might help. Blake slapped Cole on the shoulder, the smack echoing. Classic protective big sister move. Still thinks a pressure gauge makes her Warren Buffett. One of the independent directors cleared his throat, uncomfortable, but said nothing. Another pretended to check email. Cole waved a dismissive hand at me. Tell you what, Raven. After we close the sale, I'll let you keep one drafting table in the new Houston office. You can draw all the pipes you want on the 95th floor. Deal. More chuckles. Someone in the back actually clapped twice before catching themselves. Skylar leaned toward Mom and stage whispered, "She probably brought colored pencils." Mom smiled like it was the cutest thing she'd heard all week. Cole turned back to the screen, finger already on the remote. Anything else from the technical department, or can we finally vote and get on with the future? I picked up my glass again. The ice had almost completely melted, leaving faint rings on the mahogany. Cole took my silence for surrender. He straightened his tie, faced the room, and opened his mouth to call the vote. Lauren Brooks rose from her chair, the air conditioning still roaring at full blast. She placed a single black folder on the table with a soft thud that somehow silenced every person in the room. Before we proceed to any vote, she said, voice perfectly level, I need to disclose a material change in share ownership that occurred 13 months ago, well before Mr. Henry Sinclair's second and incapacitating stroke. She opened the folder and slid a single sheet across the mahogany toward the center. Effective April 29th of last year. Henry Sinclair, while still in full possession of his faculties, executed an irrevocable transfer of 75% of the Class A voting shares to Raven Sinclair. The transfer was witnessed, notarized, filed with the Oklahoma Secretary of State, and reported to the SEC on Form 4 the same week. She let that sit for 2 full seconds. Raven has been the controlling shareholder for the past 13 months. Every major decision since that date by charter definition has required her written consent. Cole's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might actually faint. Lauren continued without pause. As Chief Financial Officer, I am obligated to remind the board that any attempt to appoint a new CEO, authorize asset sales, or implement workforce reduction without the approval of the holder of 75% of the voting shares is null and void on its face. She closed the folder. Cole finally found his voice. It came out a cracked whisper first, then exploded. "That's impossible!" he shouted, slamming both palms on the table. Grandfather would never. He stopped himself, realizing what he'd almost said in front of the independent directors. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Skylar's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Blake looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. Uncle Victor leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Lauren, are you certain of the date?" "Positive," Lauren replied. "I was present when Henry signed. He wanted zero ambiguity. He knew exactly what he was doing." Cole spun toward me, veins bulging in his neck. "You knew. This whole time you sat there and let us." He couldn't finish the sentence. I met his stare without blinking. I was waiting to see how far you'd take it. The independent directors were already flipping through the emergency bylaws Lauren had quietly circulated 5 minutes earlier. One of them muttered, "Jesus, she's right. 75% threshold. We don't even have a quorum to challenge it." Cole's breathing came fast and shallow. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is fraud. You manipulated a sick old man." Lauren's voice cut like ice. Henry Sinclair was examined by 2 independent physicians the same week, both certified capacity. The documents are ironclad. I have the medical affidavits right here if anyone wants to review them. She tapped the folder. Blake tried to recover, forcing a laugh that died in his throat. There has to be some mistake. Cole's been running point on strategy for months. No, Lauren said simply. Raven has been running the company for months. Every wire transfer, over $5 million, every new contract, every debt repayment, her signature is on all of them. You just never bothered to look. Cole staggered back a step, knocking over his water glass. It rolled, spilled, and dripped onto the carpet. Mom finally spoke, voice trembling. "Raven, why didn't you say anything?" I turned to her slowly. "Because none of you ever asked." Cole's face twisted into something ugly. "You think this is over? I'll contest the transfer. I'll get lawyers. You'll do nothing." Lauren interrupted. "Because the moment you file, the company's outside counsel, hired and paid by Raven, will countersue for breach of fiduciary duty, tortious interference, and attempted dilution of controlling interest. Discovery alone will freeze every asset you touch." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. Meeting adjourned. Cole stood, frozen mouth working soundlessly. The room stayed dead quiet except for the endless hum of the air conditioning. 30 minutes later, the conference room still felt like the inside of a furnace. The independent directors had vanished minutes after Lauren's announcement, muttering about schedule conflicts and urgent calls. Only family and Blake remained huddled at the far end like survivors after a bomb. Cole stood, rigid hands flat on the table, staring at the black folder as if it might bite him. I walked to the head of the table, picked up Cole's abandoned remote, and clicked the projector back to life. "Since everyone suddenly wants transparency," I said, opening the laptop Lauren had slid in front of me, "let's do transparency." The first slide appeared, a stark red to green bar chart titled Debt Reduction, Last 13 Months. 13 months ago, the company owed the bank syndicate $142 million on a revolver that matured in 18 months. Default meant they took the Cushing Yard, the fleet, and triggered cross-default on every other loan. On the same day grandfather transferred the voting shares to me, I refinanced the entire stack at 2.9 over SOFR, paid the old notes in full, and locked in a covenant-light 5-year term. Current balance owed to anyone zero. I clicked again. A pipeline map of Oklahoma and Texas lit up with new green contract icons. While Cole was flying private to pitch his AI fairy tale to Houston funds, I sat in conference rooms in Midland and the Woodlands and personally renegotiated the Chevron Rapid Response Fracture contract for an additional $160 million over 5 years and closed a new coiled tubing master service agreement with ExxonMobil worth $120 million. Both are already cash flow positive. Combined EBITDA contribution next year alone, $41 million. Another click. A waterfall chart titled Share Consolidation. Every time a distant cousin or retiring rig hand panicked after grandfather's second stroke and put shares on the market, I bought them. Quietly. Off market. 12% total, all at or below book. Current fully diluted voting control, 87%. The remaining 13% is held by trusts that have executed irrevocable proxies in my favor. There is no minority bloc left to challenge anything. Cole's knuckles were white on the table edge. His breathing came shallow and fast. Mom tried first, voice cracking. Raven. You did all this without telling any of us. Weekly updates went to the family distribution list, I answered. Every single one was marked red. 0 replies. Ever. Skylar opened her mouth closed. It tried again. This is insane. You can't just hijack a century-old company because I didn't hijack anything I cut in. I saved it. 45 days from losing the yard, Skylar. That's where we were when grandfather put the shares in my name. Blake, desperate to regain footing, leaned forward. There are still remedies. Minority oppression statutes in Oklahoma are strong. Freeze out claims. We can file for books and records, force a fairness opinion. I turned to him slowly. The firm that literally wrote Oklahoma's minority oppression statute now works for me, Blake. Their new retention agreement was signed last week. If you file anything, their first motion will be for an emergency receiver and a temporary restraining order, freezing every personal guarantee any of you signed on the refinance, which, by the way, all of you did. Cole exploded upward chair, crashing backward into the credenza. You think this is over? He shouted. I'll tear this place apart in court for years before I let you. Lauren spoke quietly from her seat. That threat was just recorded, Cole. The conference AV system never shut off. Oklahoma is a one-party consent state. I clicked to the final slide, one line in bold red. Any challenge to the transfer or current control will be met with immediate counterclaims for breach of fiduciary duty, corporate waste, and tortious interference. Discovery will include full personal financial records of all plaintiffs. I closed the laptop. I'm not here to negotiate, I said. I'm here to deliver notice. The Cushing Yard stays. The service rigs stay. The 2,200 employees stay. Starting tomorrow morning, Cole, Skylar, Mom, and Uncle Victor are on unpaid administrative leave pending review. Blake is no longer welcome on company property. Cole lunged forward. Blake caught his arm just in time. Mom was openly crying now, mascara running. I picked up the black folder and tucked it under my arm. Security is waiting in the hallway. Anyone still in this building in 10 minutes will be removed. I walked to the door, paused once, and looked back. The air conditioning roared on, but the room had never felt hotter. 72 hours later, the July heat still refused to break. I was reviewing the new 5-year fleet maintenance bids when my assistant buzzed. The managing partner of Cole's Houston private equity fund was on the line. He didn't waste words. After the board meeting story hit the Journal, their compliance team ran a full forensic on Cole's terminal. They found dozens of unauthorized models using Sinclair data for personal swing trades, timed to his planned divestiture. Cole was fired that morning, marched out by security with one banker's box and his Harvard diploma. By 11:17 a.m., the Dallas bank filed the UCC-1 foreclosure on Cole's 4,200-square-foot penthouse in Uptown. He had personally guaranteed the $7.2 million mortgage when rates were 2.9, and his bonus was guaranteed. The sheriff's sale was set for 21 days out. Blake vanished the same afternoon. He drained the joint wedding account $487,000 earmarked for the venue caterer and band, then boarded Delta Flight 1487 to Grand Cayman, using his middle name and an old passport. The wedding planner called me hysterical. Every contract was in Cole's name, every deposit non-refundable. Mom changed her cell number before noon the next day. I discovered it when I dialed to update grandfather's medication schedule. The old number rang once and flipped to a generic robotic greeting. Skylar blocked me on every social platform within 6 hours and systematically deleted every childhood photo that included me from her grid. Her last public story was a black square captioned, "Blood isn't always thicker." Uncle Victor sent one text at 2:04 a.m. "You have destroyed everything this family stood for." Then he turned his phone off and never turned it back on. I drove to Cole's building that evening. Security already had the new list only Raven Sinclair allowed past the lobby without escort. Cole's reserved parking spot was empty. A moving crew was hauling Italian leather sectionals and the custom wine fridge to a climate-controlled storage unit for the lender. The Tulsa World ran the front-page business story the next morning. Century-old Sinclair control shocker family split wide open. Anonymous sources close to the situation called it elder abuse and corporate theft. My name appeared 27 times. Cole, Mom, and Skylar were all unreachable for comment. I declined every interview request. Grandfather's long-term care facility called on day 3. The finance office said automatic payments from Mom's account had been canceled effective immediately. I wired 36 months of prepaid care from the corporate account before the woman finished her sentence. Cole showed up drunk at the Sinclair Tower lobby at 4:12 p.m. the same day. He screamed my name up 52 floors until building security detained him. Tulsa PD cited him for trespass and public intoxication. The body cam footage was on the local news by 6. Skylar bought a one-way first-class ticket to Aspen the following morning, charged to the black Amex Mom still hadn't closed. She posted a single photo of the Rocky Mountains with the caption, "Some betrayals cut deeper than others." Mom leased a furnished 2-bedroom in Nichols Hills under her maiden name, paying 6 months cash up front. The leasing agent later told my assistant she arrived with 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases and nothing else. Blake surfaced long enough to file a missing person report on himself in Baton Rouge, trying to stall any fraud warrants Cole was threatening to pursue over the wedding money. By the end of the week, every phone number, email address, and social account connected to them had been deleted, blocked, or deactivated from my life. The heat index hit 112 degrees on the 4th day. I sat alone in the corner office that used to be grandfather's, watching the sun bleed orange across the Arkansas River, and felt absolutely nothing. 9 months later, the autumn sun hung low and gentle over Keystone Lake. I pushed grandfather's wheelchair along the paved path that circles the nursing home's private dock. The leaves had turned burnt orange and gold, and the wind carried the faint smell of water and pine. He wore the same navy cardigan I bought him last Christmas, the one nobody else ever remembered to bring. His hands rested on the blanket across his lap, thin but steady. I stopped at the bench where we always stopped, locked the brakes, and sat beside him. The lake was flat and silver in the late light. For a long time, neither of us moved. Words had left him 10 months ago, but we never needed many. He lifted his right hand, slow, deliberate, and closed it around my left 3 times. 1, 2, 3. The same signal he used when I was 8 and scared of thunderstorms. The same signal he used the day he handed me the first set of rig blueprints and said, "Draw it better." The same signal he used the morning he signed the share transfer, looked me in the eye, and squeezed 3 times so I would never doubt why. I squeezed back once. That was our deal. 3 from him meant I trust you. 1 from me meant I won't let you down. We watched a lone fishing boat drift past. A heron lifted off the water and disappeared into the trees. I thought about the company. Revenue up 29%. Debt gone. 200 new hires. The Cushing yard running 3 shifts again. Everything he built still standing stronger than before. I thought about the rest of them. Cole was living in a 1-bedroom outside Houston, working pipeline inspections under a different last name. Skylar was waiting tables in Aspen off the grid. Mom had moved twice since Oklahoma City, always paying cash, always alone. Blake got 6 months in federal prison for the wedding fraud once the Caymans finally cooperated. Uncle Victor sold his lake house and vanished somewhere in New Mexico. None of them had visited grandfather once. Not a card, not a call, not a single flower. I was the only name on the visitor log for the last 9 months. The sun touched the horizon and turned the lake blood red for a moment. Grandfather squeezed my hand 3 more times, weaker now but certain. I leaned close to his ear. It's still ours, grandfather. Every inch of it. He didn't open his eyes, but the corner of his mouth lifted the smallest smile I had seen in a year. The wind picked up cool against my face. Some families break and try to glue the pieces back together. Ours didn't break. It simply ended. And that was the price. I stayed until the light was gone and the first stars came out over the water.